to the Strategy and, the Strategy and Policy Committee for the 15th of February. We'll start off offering a karakia. I oha ki runga ki a ranganui. I oha ki raro ki a papatuanuku. Wakatairanga. Te kupu. No, that's the closing. Wrong one. We'll start again. I oha ki runga ki a ranganui. Hi oha ki raro ki a papatuanuku. Ture kina ngā mea, kina ki te pai atia. Uhia mai o Kurawai Aroha. He taanga mā mātou. Ka puta ki te wā ao, ki te ao marama. Humie, huie, taikie. I think we've got our waiata up on the screen. The song words.
Do we have everyone with their lights on?
Not me.
Well, otherwise nobody in the public can hear if we don't.
Okay.
He honore, he karoria, maurarongo ki te wenua. Wakaro, paie, ki ngā tangata katoa. Aki ake, aki ake, amine. Te atua, te peringa, toku oranga, toku oranga.
Thank you. Lovely harmonies, thank you. Are there any declarations of... No, apologies first. We've got a few apologies. One from Charlie.
Rob is here now.
So we don't need Rob's. We've got one from Philippa for lateness. And two from members, one from Helen, who needs to leave at 11 o'clock, and one from Michael that needs to leave at 11:30. So what I'm proposing is that we get through this meeting in short order and be finished by 11:30 at the latest. There's nothing on the agenda that should take us longer than that. All right, do we have any... are you going to move that?
No, sorry,
Andrew?
just related to that, I may be flexible, but I maybe need to leave at 11:30.
Okay, well, we'll definitely be finished by 11:30,
Okay.
won't we? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So Andrew's going to move those apologies. Josh will second. Are we all in favour that those apologies be accepted? Aye. Against? Carried, thank you. Any declarations of interest in relation to items of business on this agenda? No declarations? Then we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes of our meeting held on the 28th of November. Thank you, Peter. You're moving that they be approved as a correct record of that meeting. And Charlotte, you'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. It's actually very quiet. I was listening on the radio on the way into Parliament, and they were all yelling and carrying on when the, not the Speaker, the Chair of the Select Committee was trying to pass a recommendation, so thank you for your silence.
So we've had the Parking Bylaw team want to submit a map, so we just have to accept the
Okay.
additional...
So we have we need a resolution to accept additional information in relation to the parking item, which is item 5.1, and that is a map of the locations, and you should have all have had that sent through to you, notice of that. And Ross is going to move our acceptance of that additional information. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Glenda. Any debate? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so our first item of business is 5.1, adoption of statement of proposal proposal and approval to consult for parking bylaw and parking controls. Who's going to take the podium? Oh, Elise. Do you draw the short straw today? And Tamsin, welcome.
Yeah, Morena, thank you. So I'm here today with Tamsin, and we also have the parking team here in support for any technical questions. So our parking bylaw is now due for its statutory review, and as part of this we're required to produce a statement of proposal and consult with our community on the changes. In terms of the parking bylaw itself, this is functioning as expected with no major changes proposed. However, the parking controls, which outline the parking rules, tariffs and exemptions, have now been reviewed by Council's officers, and changes are being proposed through this consultation. The proposed changes are intended to improve parking turnover in Whanganui CBD and increase parking revenue as part of the 6-point plan and the long-term plan in order to reduce the anticipated rates rise for next year, as well as ensure we have more mobility parking in the town centre and to extend the parking exemptions that are currently on offer to Super Gold card holders and to UCOL students. So the statement of proposal you have today outlines all of these changes, as well as our analysis of the advantages and disadvantages of the changes. What we're seeking today is your approval to put this proposal out for consultation alongside the draft LTP, which will be consulted on from the 2nd of April. So I do really want to emphasise that, particularly if we have media listening, that this consultation will not be opening until 2nd of April. The reason we are doing it now is that there's a significant amount of work for the long-term plan, and this is one that we can line up slightly earlier, but it will be consulted on alongside the long-term plan because it is part of that suite of measures and policies that form part of the 6-point plan to reduce the rates rise for next year. So of interest will be the proposed changes to increase parking tariffs in the CBD. And this proposal means that parking in premium spaces, such as Victoria Ave, will come at a higher cost. We note there's always the option for free or lower cost parking on the side streets of Victoria Ave and just outside of that main area, as well as the mobility parking that is available. So these proposed changes for consultation are in line with the direction we've been given by elected members at the long-term plan workshop. There's also some standardisation and consistency of rates so that if parking is off-street or on-street, it's the same rate to make that fair and consistent and easy. So increasing parking tariffs is really also about helping to increase the parking turnover, which should help to address some of the high levels of occupancy and congestion we've seen on Vic Ave. For those who spend any time in Vic Ave on the lunch rush between about 11 and 1, we're seeing very high levels of occupancy and congestion. So the key principle of parking tariffs is to enable short-term parking so that customers and visitors can come and do what they need to do and leave, rather than enable people who are working to park all day in those premium spots. In addition to the changes to parking tariffs, there will also be 14 new parking metres are proposed for Rutland Street, Ridgeway Street, Guyton and St Hill Street. And the metres are proposed for these areas as they are also premium parks, which often fill up all day with local business owners or workers parking in these spots all day. So again, it's about enabling people who are coming into town in order to be able to visit those areas with ease. That's the principle. So we hope that installing these new metres will also help to encourage that turnover, and any additional revenue they generate will also be used for the purposes of offsetting the rates rise. You'll have a map of the proposed meters tabled as additional information. We do want to note this map is going to be designed just so it's very easy and user-friendly for the public when it goes out for consultation. So when that package of material goes up on 2nd of April, there'll be supporting maps and visuals to help the public. Finally, in response to our engagement with stakeholders and the parking survey, which was run in 2022, it is proposed we extend the UCOL student exemption on Taupoki by 1 hour, and this is to enable students to park for the entire length of their classes. So classes are often 3 hours, and the 2-hour exemption was not allowing them to stay, as well as expand the Super Gold scheme to Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. and add a further 3 mobility parks, including 2 long parks with mobility vans in the Winston car park area, which is just down here. So that's the key changes and the proposal. Reiterating, this is out for public consultation, so we will be welcoming all community feedback on this as part of the LTP package. Otherwise, I will take the paper and materials as read and happy to take questions. If they are technical questions, I will invite parking team members to come up and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Very well explained. So questions. I'm expecting to have your thoughts in sufficient order that you need to ask questions just once, which is not to say that's asking questions twice is out of the question, but expect my glare if you do. For what it's worth, it scares my kids, might not you. Michael.
2 quick questions. What's the rationale on Super Gold card parking on Saturdays?
So through pre-engagement in September, October last year and previous reviews of parking, there've been a request to extend the Super Gold Card scheme from, it's currently 8 to 11 to 1 or 2 p.m. has been really common, but the rationale for having it as 8 to 11 is that brings in traffic outside of our peak hours currently, which are 11 to 1, so we're trying to kind of not create any more congestion during that 11 to 1 period. So by shifting it to Saturdays, which was another thing they requested through pre-engagement, you're, I suppose, giving them another benefit, but without negatively impacting the congestion during that key occupancy period.
Second part to that is, will there be an impact analysis completed on this? And the reason why, rationale for that is, I was aware that not having Supercard holders on Saturdays allowed more people to park on a time when most people are away from work, and our revenues are gathered on Saturdays because of it. So are we going to get an impact assessment on this? Sorry,
not sure about the impact assessment, but what we do know is that based on our data, that Saturdays between those hours are a lot quieter than Wednesday to Friday, 8 to 11 for parking. So there's no real loss. There's no real impact as such for congestion for a Saturday. So still keeping away from those peak times, and still, if you look at the markets, we've still got free parking in certain areas down there to promote the markets, to make it easier. But for Super Gold Card, it won't create a congestion issue on a Saturday morning, based on the numbers we've got.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah, we got the
Michael.
data. We got the data. We can monitor and feedback whenever.
Thank you. Rob?
Thank you. I'd just like some comment about that justifies the need for extra mobility parking compared to what's there now. 3 extra parks, so there must be some data justifying the need for that.
Part of the survey, pre-survey at the end of the year, came back with a need from our partners, but also what we've found, and it's very difficult to, through our stats, to differentiate between different types of parking, like mobility parking or just general parking, right, to see what occupancy is. So we use the parking staff to visually do it. It's not as good, but do visual occupancy assessments for a period of about 3 months on their travels. Now, the number of mobility parks. So we also found that the most popular areas for parking for mobility parks was around the B&Z area of the Ave. People wanting to physically go into a bank, right? But also we found that there are more longer vehicles like vans with rear wheelchair elevators, whatever they're called, ramps, where they can't park in parallel parks and safely. They can't. They're too long to get people in and out. And angle parking creates a safety issue by parking long vehicles out on a street to get people in and out. So that's the rationale behind using our off-street car parks where there's room to do that. That is the rationale behind.
Okay, thank you.
Philippa?
Thank you. I think page, anyway, maybe page 25 on our agenda, but where that has the, the current and proposed tariffs, the table, sorry, I'm struggling to, page 6. Just on the off-street, current tariff 50 cents per hour, proposed tariff $2 per hour, so quadrupling that, particularly that one. And then the comment underneath that talks about discouraging longer-term parking on Victoria Ave and encouraging parking on side streets. So my reading of that is or off streets, but actually off streets are going to become pretty close to the Victoria Ave cost. So quadrupling of cost, and I guess just the rationale for that, and if you could just be really clear what an off street is, parking. And we're kind of moving them to be quite close to the costs now of side streets and Victoria Ave when we're looking to discourage parking on Victoria Ave.
Yeah, it's all part of the consultation, really. But it's also a difference between a side street and off-street. Off-street parking is our car parks. So it's probably a bad name. It should be called car parks. Like, the one across from the Opera House, there's whatever else. The one behind Drew's Ave behind the movie theatre. That's called off-street. Side streets is anything that is not Victoria Ave. That's how it works. Now, the off-street parking, 50 cents an hour currently, is extremely cheap. The idea about, I'll cover something you didn't mention, the idea about making side streets and off-streets the same is then you have the ability to move between them. So currently we have roughly 3 zones, Victoria Ave, side streets and off-streets, all different. So you'll be able to park, it gives you more freedom to move with your money, which I think is a bloody good, fair thing. Yes, you're right, the price is close to what Vic Ave is, and that'll be part of, I guess, what the consultation is. I mean, very conscious not to make it unmanageable, really, put the price out of people's grasp, but I'm interested to see what comes back with consultation.
Okay, but basically you're saying that current of 50 cents and to other regions as well is very low.
Extreme. We did some analysis around New Zealand with similar sized places, and I think that was, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa.
Yeah, I'll just
Go on, Elise.
just to reinforce the consistency. So what we had was with the 50 cents and the $1, those were inconsistent. Those, I think, should have been the same previously. And so we're fixing that inconsistency now. As Jason has mentioned, those rates are extremely low, and the Vic Ave rate is extremely low for a CBD rate compared to other centres. Thank you.
Helen?
Thank you. There's an Ingester Street off-street car park owned by council which
from what I observe almost daily, is practically empty all the time. But you're proposing to put a $2 hourly tariff into that as well?
Yes. And it is. It's very low. It's our lowest used car park, yes.
Okay.
It's out of the way.
It is out of the way. Has any thought been given to how we can either increase the occupancy there by perhaps retaining a lower tariff there as a one-off, or any other options?
No thought has been to have different rates for different off-street areas. It's something that could be done, definitely can be done. It would limit the movement of people, the ability to use your funds elsewhere. Interesting, there's right next door there's a rental car park as well, where people pay a rental fee to park their vehicles per week. That's the we have the lowest occupancy there of any rental park as well, right next door. So it's probably the part of town that it's in, I would imagine. That it's a little far away from most things.
Thank you. And when you refer to that people can move around if it's the same fee, you're referring to the pay-by-plate method, where you're basically using a card, I believe, and you're punching in your registration number, and then you could move around within that. Let's say you wanted to, you're going to do all your jobs in an hour, but you needed to move around town.
Correct.
As long as you're staying in $2 areas, you don't have to repay.
That is correct. So when you go to a meter, when you move, well, you don't have to go to a meter, but you can go to a meter, and as soon as you put your rego in, it'll check to see how much credit you've got.
Yeah.
Everyone would have seen that, to see how much time you've got left.
Yeah, so which is great. So that's where the aligning all the tariffs, apart from the avenue, you can that's a real advantage for people. But if you then moved into say you'd paid for your $2 park and you moved into the Victoria Avenue, you got to start again. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you, Helen. We have the recommendation up on the screen, that the Strategy and Policy Committee determines that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of managing parking within the district, and the parking bylaw is the most appropriate form of bylaw, that the committee adopts the statement of proposal for the draft parking bylaw and parking controls, and approves the parking bylaw and parking controls for consultation alongside the long-term plan 24-27. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Thank you, Charlotte. Is there any debate? Helen.
I just want to thank the staff. I think this is a particularly well put together paper, and thank you. It will help the public to give good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Rob?
Thank you. Yes, first of all, I would like to thank the staff for this work that's gone into this. It's very well thought out, especially the new areas that have come in, and the demand's been looked at quite intensely. I just want to say how successful the new parking meters are. And, there was quite a bit of, there was choices to be made back when that decision was made to pick that particular meter. And I think that the team got the right one. I went to Wellington last week, and it's $5 an hour there, all over town, everywhere. The meters are very hard to actually read. They're like the Palmerston North meters. When the sun's on the screen, you can't see what it's saying. We've got nice big meters, they're illuminated, and they're easy to read, and they're very user-friendly. So I think that's been great. I think as far as the cost is concerned, I think I'm very pleased that the differential between the avenue and the rest of the parking has been maintained. It'll be quite easy to promote the message that it's lower cost and for longer time if you park outside the avenue. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rob. Nice positive comments, thank you. Michael?
I'll add to the positive comments. I've had a lot of feedback recently from friends of mine who came in to Wanganui, and their comment was, oh, Wanganui is finally in the 21st century because they're using the app. Because it's the first thing you do. You go to a city and you download all the apps and you try and figure out which one the city's using. So now that we're actually using an app, people are actually paying. Their comments were, still too cheap though. Like, it is too cheap. Our parking is too cheap. You know, cycle. Please cycle. It's great. So I don't understand the new parking meters, but I do know the public want them, so I do agree with that. So I look forward to that feedback. The mobility parks, I do actually agree with my colleague a little bit. I do think we need to get some more data on how many, because we may need 6, we may need 8. There's 2,500 people of, I hate the word disabled, but disabled people in Wanganui. How many of those require disabled parking? How many do we have? Who goes to the parking? What's the turnover like? I think we just need more data on that. UCOL students, I think it's great, and I think people will agree with that. I am a little bit suspicious on the supercard holder on Saturdays.
Rob?
I'm suspicious on it because it sounds like a nice thing as opposed to a data-driven thing, but I'm sure you're going to provide the data on the fact that it's not actually going to have any impact. And the reason why I say that is because literally yesterday, someone said to me from the parking team that Saturdays, because that's not supercard holders, is a great turnover of cars and revenue. So I just want to know, are we going to lose revenue? Are we going to have problems? I've never paid for parking on Saturdays, hence my tickets. But overall, I'm looking forward to everyone's feedback, actually. So thank you. And look forward to the app being rolled out more.
Thanks, Michael. Ross, then Andrew.
I think Andrew's before me.
That's all right, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously thank the staff for a very concise presentation. I also want to thank the staff that I did my readings and I sent my many questions through, and every single one was answered before this meeting, and I said to officers that I would not be asking any questions because I was totally satisfied with the responses. I thank you for that quick turnaround. I also want to say thank you for the gold card inclusion for Saturdays. I believe that's important to our seniors. Grey Power will thank you, and I believe it's a demonstration of respect for our elders, a tangible sign of respect for our elders, and I hope that the public will support what to me is a no-brainer. Thank you.
Andrew, Charlotte, then Philippa.
All right, I'm probably going to repeat a little bit of what it's been said so far, and that is thank you to the staff. This is a really easy read and comprehensive as well. The other bit is what I think Michael and Rob have referred to, Councillor Michael and Councillor Rob, is the parking meters themselves. Wanganui can be sometimes slow to change and get with the times, and there's a bit of pushback at the start, but I think we've had a good adoption rate and acceptance of the new technology. I also, with Michael, Councillor Michael, modes of transport, we've got the most successful Horizons bus service, which is the Tide, and so you know we're seeing our city find it very hard to get car parks sometimes. So I hear lots of noise about that. So encouraging people to use public transport and cycleways is great. Which alludes to the next point, kind of related to this, which is car parking in the future. And I think I'm already playing in that space and thinking about what that looks like, but there's no doubt that we will need more car parks as our city grows. We're on a high growth trajectory, so we need to bear that in mind as well, car parking for the future. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to tautoko half of what Mayor Andrew has said, and just point out that consideration of parking and tariffs need to go hand in hand with the future of our public transport network. As Andrew has said, the success rate of the Tide has just been just incredible. Horizons has recently voted on their long-term plan and will be consulting very soon, and they have voted to extend Wanganui's public transport network. So it would be fantastic if the public of Wanganui could engage in that consultation. A little off track to this item, I will admit, but a successful public transport network needs to go hand in hand with the parking in our city. So thank you, and thanks to all the staff for all the work on this.
Philippa.
Yeah, just briefly, I also found it a really easy paper to read. I think staff have encapsulated the issues really well. I am interested, I think the comment the Deputy Mayor made, I think, maybe some feedback will come, or maybe, if there's a level where part of this is obviously about, and it says up front, about taking some pressure off rates with some other income like this, and if we can fill up our parking spaces, even those that are out a little bit, by considering perhaps some differentials, then that might be a good thing. But let's wait for the feedback. Yeah, as far as active transport goes, I think in the future also it'd be great to see that we need more room for some bike racks and around around our parking areas. And just feedback from a 23-year-old Canterbury University student who doesn't usually have a lot of favourables at that age in her life about, small town Wanganui where they grew up. She's like, Mum, it was great to put some money in the parking meter yesterday. It was like, my God, it was, if I do that 5 minutes in Christchurch to get my coffee, it's like $20, and it was like, $2. So that was nice. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks Philippa. Thank you team. I think you've had lots of affirmation there, so good work. We've got the recommendation up that I've read out. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour please say aye. Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.2. I'm just going to can we just pause that while the officers get up to the table? I just need to get a refill of the drinks. Yes. Welcome. Adoption of statement of proposal and approval to consult for solid waste bylaw.
Thank
and
you.
I see Stu's waiting in the wings.
Stu is also here to answer more technical questions if you have them. So yeah, this is adoption of the statement of proposal and approval to consult for the solid waste bylaw. So this is, the primary driver of this is the waste plan. Under the Waste Minimisation Act, local authorities are required to have a waste plan in place. During our last review, we identified a number of objectives that either were only or best achieved through having a solid waste bylaw in place. So the objectives that we have identified there are around events. Currently, most event waste management planning is voluntary. Regardless of the size of the event, there is no obligation to have any kind of waste management planning in place, and this would modify that. Providing the curbside waste services that we have committed to providing, so recycling and food waste. That's also why this is happening now. If you have any questions about that, those services are planned to come in place towards the middle of the year, and this should slot into place to underpin those when they come into effect. There's also data collection around private waste companies of waste collection services that we don't provide. So general waste collection, we currently have no eyes on, which makes waste planning difficult. And under the Waste Minimisation Act, we can use a bylaw to essentially collect that data, which would make waste planning in the future more easily. Same goes for waste disposal facilities. We don't currently have any in Wanganui, but if there were any proposed to be in place, they would then come under this, and data collection would be available there as well. And there are some enforcement options as well regarding both the general rules and the curbside waste that we're proposing to implement. Consultation is scheduled to run from next Monday, so the 19th of February, to the 20th of March. And we'll be back for deliberations and hearings after that. This has also gone through the Sustainability and Waste Advisory Group. A couple of times we've had pre-engagement with the waste sector and the events sector, although that is also still, we are still having some conversations around that. And the waste sector is supportive of the waste bylaw as it currently stands. And aside from that, I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thanks, Hannah. Can you just repeat that last? I think I heard the waste sector is in support of the bylaw. Is that who's the waste sector? Sorry, just to be.
Yeah. So these are businesses that work in the waste sector. Stu can talk a bit more, but these businesses are used to these bylaws. They operate in other districts, and this provides clarity and certainty. And our bylaw has been based on other districts and what they're doing. So there's nothing novel about it. It's a standard approach that they're familiar with. So supportive in the sense that it is aligned with what would be expected of a bylaw. This bylaw, as Hannah has said, has been signalled since the waste plan was adopted in 2021. So there's been, plenty of time for warming up. Great. We do want to reiterate that the consultation does not cover the curbside services. The curbside services are starting this year. The recycling is starting this year. The consultation is about the bylaw and is primarily targeted at the waste sector.
Great, thank you. So, questions? Rob? I saw you coming, mate.
Thank you. The bylaw then, just give us an idea of the timeline here. It's going out for consultation pretty shortly. When do you think that it will be adopted and operative?
So we're expecting hearings to be in April, which should give us time for it to be adopted by council in deliberations shortly following that. I think 1st of July is when our curbside services are scheduled to take effect, the recycling at least, and it should be in place ahead of that.
Okay. And the other question is we adopt a bylaw, great. Are we adequately resourced to enforce that bylaw? Who's going to enforce it?
Well, let Stu talk to that, because I expect that's part of the waste team's work that they've been doing.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We don't see an added increase in a lot of resource around enforcement. It's something that we will have to do under the new service anyway. It's as Elise and Hannah have said, it's geared up to address issues at the curbside when we introduce the new service, so we can undertake our service the way we have manufactured it and the methodology we're going to use. So our contractor will be the first port of call. They will be doing the enforcement, the assessments of contamination, etc., which will be underlined, underpinned by the bylaw, and as officers we will be coming in behind that to do any enforcement, which essentially is to not accept the product at the curb or take away the bin in extreme circumstances. But as we've discussed with yourselves, that will be a soft approach to start the service as our community get used to the service.
Yeah, thank you. I've got to ask all my questions at once, I believe.
You do. Go, Rob.
So, the data collection. What data do you hope to collect, Stuart?
The data will be granular, but it will be based on tonnages and types of waste that are collected through the various services that the contractors provide to our community. So it won't only be curbside, but it will be those that are going to transfer stations and aggregated and then on to landfill. There's a high level data that's now been collected by the Ministry for the Environment at landfill. What we're missing is the data that's telling us what's happening and in our community. both at curbside and drop off and collected by the waste companies. So they will be obligated to tell us that at a reasonably high level, but enough to inform our waste planning into the future.
And final question, illegal dumping, I believe, doesn't come under this bylaw. Can you just explain to me the relativity of illegal dumping to this bylaw and how it's being enforced now?
Illegal dumping is the Litter Act principally, and other acts that adequately cover illegal dumping within our community. One aspect of this bylaw, which will be the new service, will be a 5 metre perimeter around the collection area that the contractor is obliged to clean up, and the ability for them to tell us when there is notifications of illegal dumping in the street. This doesn't really cover illegal dumping. It's covered currently through other mechanisms, and it's something that's, as you know, that we're giving particular attention to at the moment.
Thank you, Rob. Josh, then Michael, then Philippa, then Charlotte.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick question around waste management involving events. So it says in the agenda that currently waste management for events is entirely voluntary. My understanding was that we, as in council, required a waste minimisation or management plan for events taking place on our sites. So I just want to understand what this will do, and whether it's about enforcement rather than an actual requirement, which I believed we already had.
So, what do you want to cover?
I was going to say, yes, events on council sites where we've asked them to do a plan are different. This would be events in the district. So the bylaw applies to the entire district. So if someone is hosting an event, not a council event, and it's considered a significant event, then they're required to produce a waste plan and report back on that waste plan. So it's putting...
So yeah, it's, the idea is to target significant events that are either that receive council funding, are held on council land, or where the organiser is actively seeking council support with handling their waste. They then have to have a waste management plan. So
it's universal and enforceable as well. Okay, great, thank you.
Michael?
Sort of answered my question, but not quite. So this is not going to impact...
I'll ask a question. Will this impact smaller events? Will we have less events because of this waste management around events plan?
No, it's not expected to. We're still, so the part that we're still tweaking slightly is where exactly that threshold sits, but the idea is that it should only be bigger events. Smaller events, particularly where we don't expect a whole lot of waste, are not expected to file a waste plan.
That's my preference. Thank you.
And this is an area that we'd invite feedback from the community on as well.
Thanks, Michael. Philippa, I think, was next.
Thank you. I have a third go at this events issue, just understanding it. But yeah, I mean, on page you talked about there's been some answers to the events issue or part, but page 32, I might be missing some more. It doesn't talk about the size of the event or where the event is. I am a voluntary event organiser of an event that we could say sits on public land. You know, we have a number of events, and you know, in various areas, and I'm talking about rowing. And I guess, while I understand the intent, but I can't see the. I think we need some further clarification on the size of the event. You know, where that event is, and you know, the reporting requirements, because actually it can become quite onerous when you're trying to do everything else, and also you could slip it by, and it's kind of like. Jeepers, there's also, like it says, the council may approve or decline a proposed event waste management plan. Does that mean the event couldn't go ahead? Just stuff like that?
So to answer your first question, so you're right, in the actual section dealing with events, it doesn't make that distinction. That is on page 26 under the definitions. So for the purposes of the bylaw, an event is a temporary activity of significant scale in terms of expected attendance, length, or waste generation. So we've defined the term event on page 26 of your agenda, and then when we use event on page 32, that's the definition that we're using. So this section is not intended to apply to small events, but it's differentiated by definition rather than by a clause. In terms of...
So Hannah, can you just expand on that a little bit, because I think it's a really good kind of delving into the issue and how it might affect smaller voluntary events, as Philippa says. So with what Philippa's outlined, would it be captured, do you think? What would the decision-making process be for someone in Philippa's situation?
So if you're running a small event, you don't need to worry about it, basically, is how it works. Your event is not defined as an event underneath the bylaw, sorry. So you don't need to worry about those sections. How it can get a little tricky in saying, like, putting a specific pin in it, so saying, like, you know, an event where they're expected to be 100 or more people, or an event that's expected to cover this square footage of area, like, it's a very changeable kind of threshold, so it's hard to put a specific line in the sand, although we're working on doing the best job we can. But a small event would not count as an event as far as the bylaw is concerned, is the way this operates. So if you're running a small event, you're not expecting, you know, like a whole bunch of waste, you're not expecting overflowing bins, it's not an issue. If you're running a large event that's running multiple days, that has multiple, say, food trucks that could generate waste, then you might start reaching the threshold to come under the bylaw.
How does a bylaw process work, if you want to put examples in, so that people can kind of compare, contrast with what they're doing?
Yeah, as Hannah said, I think we would steer away from saying, you know, attendance 1,000 people or above or something exact like that. There needs to be some flexibility, but we have said expected attendance numbers, length, waste generated, if it's open to the public or ticketed, you know, what is the nature of it? If it's trying to think of a sort of food event where you might have a lot of packaging, a lot of waste. What I can recommend is that we will develop some guidelines to sit alongside the bylaw to support this, and we'll do it based on the feedback that we get, as well as looking at what other councils have done. But we're not keen to put in those specifics in here. We think it's better to have the principles that we've outlined in terms of attendance, length, waste generation, ticketing, and then we can develop some supporting guidelines. Stu, would that be helpful?
Yes, it would be helpful, and feedback will help develop that. Just to give you some comfort, though, it's nothing that we don't really do now. As Councillor Josh just alluded to, the triggers are the applications for those particular parks and reserves, council properties. So we get some information now about who's going to use it and what for, and what sort of waste streams will be used. And we do offer services and help for community organisations to minimise waste now. It just brings in behind a level of regulation which coerces those that are not currently wanting to take up that opportunity. Most do. We will not stop that assistance. We will still assist people to get a good event and to minimise waste for their events. It's not our intention to just say you must do it. It's simply to capture as much, and it'll be targeted at those events that generate the most waste. And a lot of it is planning well, as we all know, and getting the right products in so that you can minimise it afterwards.
Thank you. So it seems that the feedback's going to be important in this area. Philippa, did you want to, are you finished on that line of questioning? Okay. Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually very much on the same line, which was just around the definition of significance. I guess, following on from Philippa's questions, can I assume that in relation to my colleague's concerns, an obvious differential would be the Billy Webb Challenge would not come under this bylaw, but Vintage Weekend would?
Yeah, so again, it's really difficult to draw a hard line. Even providing examples can sort of... I guess kind of the goal is we don't plan for this to be overly litigious, which is one of the reasons why we've kind of resisted putting a really hard line in, because that's when you start getting into arguments about what meets the threshold, what doesn't meet the threshold, why do things meet the threshold. This is supposed to be kind of something that we can use to work together with people who are planning events to make sure that waste that's generated is handled responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess within the realm of events, one, could you not take a leaf out of liquor licensing book? Because they quite simply define what requires what license.
Yeah, so it's...
I see, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't say that loud. It comes back to the principle of how much waste is being generated by this event. What's going to be the impact of the waste, not numbers or the venue that it's held in necessarily. So can I suggest we invite the feedback? We've got ongoing engagement with the events community on this. These provisions are standard across bylaws across the country. So this is not a novel approach to it, and we'll work on developing guidelines to support this bylaw through the consultation process.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a good place to land there with that. Very important to hear the feedback from the community. And this is just a reminder, as you know, this is an invitation to discuss the issue. We're not making decisions here today. So it looks like we've finished with the questioning. We have a recommendation up on the screen there that this committee determines that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of managing waste within the district, and the proposed solid waste bylaw is the most appropriate form of bylaw, and that we adopt the statement of proposal for the draft solid waste bylaw and approves the draft solid waste bylaw for consultation between the 19th of February and the 20th of March 2024.
Just a question?
Just a mo. Thanks, Rob.
Sorry,
Philippa?
just a question. Just reading that doesn't draw the public at all to go, oh, this might involve events. And I guess my question is, could we frame a resolution that might say, and we're particularly interested or something in this feedback, or I guess perhaps the communication around this needs to be, obviously it's not just events, but events, I think, this to me wouldn't get the community to go, oh,
Philippa, personally, I think the team have got the issue well on board, and I expect to see some discussion around that in the publicity that goes out in relation to this. I don't think we need to get it in the recommendation, but if the meeting thinks otherwise, we can have a go at tinkering with the recommendation. No? All right, but I think your point is well made. So that that recommendation's been moved by Rob and seconded by Philippa. Thank you. Debate. Yes, you can.
Yes, it does give me pleasure to move this resolution at this stage as a proposal, and I hope I'll be able to move it when it comes to the adoption, because this has been something that's been needed in Wanganui for a long period of time. It goes back to Stuart and I visiting Kapiti 6 or 7, 8 years ago, and looking at their solid waste bylaw and realising the powers that they have. A power that the Kapiti Council had in theirs, which was very interesting, was that if you wanted to be a licensed collector of refuse, you also had to offer a recycling collection. And that was a path that we were heading down at one stage. So there are so many good things for this community about having a solid waste bylaw. The data collection has been very difficult over a long period of time, as I've said. The fact that it's the waste companies that hold this information, council has never held this information, that led us to sort of have very difficult credibility, you might say, of some of the data that we're able to come up with in terms of waste reduction, where the waste is going in the community, what type of waste. We really had to rely on the goodwill of those companies to tell us what their waste was all about. And this puts into regulation a tighter regime for getting that data. One of the good things also is that it licenses operators to collect refuse, and that's very, very important. You know, we have in our community people who put an ad on Facebook and say, I'll come around and collect your bags of rubbish for $5 a bag or $8 a bag or something. And then where do we see it? Dumped on the side of the road. You know, and this is happening. This is real. You know, and there's waste going into rural sites that is illegal waste. This puts the bylaw into place to be able to enforce that type of thing. So as far as events are concerned, you know, there are people, Councillor Philippa used the word onerous. It may be a little onerous at times, but it's about taking responsibility for your own waste. You know, and that's the message that we've got to get out. That people don't go to the beach and leave it all laying on the beach. They take it home with them. You know, this is all part of the same message. If you're putting on events, you've got a responsibility to take care of your own waste. Now, some of the events are doing it quite well now, but not all. But if something goes wrong, there is now powers in the council to do something about it. So I think that I'm very pleased, as I said, to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Mental note to the Mayor that Rob would like to move it when we actually approve this at council. Yeah. Philippa, then Glenda.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and pretty much endorse a lot of what Councillor Vincent said in the big issue. Just in regard to events, and I guess his comment, I think absolutely fine in regard to, you know, we all want to take responsibility, but sometimes the visibility of that and how easy that is, and sometimes when you're just focusing on kind of the key things around the event, this stuff just misses, you know, just goes under the radar. So, you know, that's, but in regard to kind of what I read at the moment, you know, it kind of, I am kind of concerned, you know, because it basically says any organiser of any event is responsible for the waste, etc., etc. And it can be quite alerting and alarming, and going on to, you know, council can decline or approve or decline a event management plan, and it can just go, oh my goodness, you know, I don't know if I want to go near that, because, you know, as an example, the Little Billy Web Challenge is not really that little, you know, it's growing, and it could have 5,000 people down the banks of the river, or, you know, and it has, and at times, and there'll be people littered over a period of, and, you know, a large area, and it's part of Vintage Weekend, so it's that kind of thing. But, you know, things like our motorboat events, you know, there's people that scatter around the whole river area. You know, we've got events like, obviously, cycling athletics, which are definitely on our council, you know, land, and I'm sure, you know, they would be responsible, and there's bins around, and then we have a lot of, I'm just talking sporting at the moment, but large sports events happen all the time, may not even be seen like events, but netball, football, you know, there's events every Saturday. So I guess it's just, I think everyone can buy into this, as long as, you know, the more that they see that it's quite manageable and quite easy, and that council's assisting them. Obviously there's bigger, can be more onerous. And just the other one, I was thinking along the same lines as Charlotte in regard to alcohol licensing. But just an example, just going to something like the Billy Web Challenge again, I thought too late this year about, we wanted just to look after our, I'll call it our corporates, you know, just the people that pay for, you know, our sponsors and a few other special people and our guests, and just having a little alcohol licensing area might have been nice for that, but not for the whole event. So, for example, if you had a reasonably small event, but you just want to look after a small group of people, and an alcohol licence broke the threshold of needing to have a waste management plan, it could get difficult. So anyway, looking forward to the feedback and the communication. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Glenda.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely support this draft bylaw and the consultation process. I think it will bring clarity actually to everybody what our responsibilities are as citizens in Wanganui, and it collectively will streamline our intent around waste minimisation in our region. So thank you. I do encourage the public fully to engage with the consultation process, and this will definitely help to ensure that the bylaw is as effective as possible. So great work so far, team. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Glenda. Helen.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yes, good bylaw. The events thing is an issue. I know how people putting on events, they'll read waste minimisation plan, and it will scare a lot of people off, just general members of the public who are running events. So how that is managed is very important. And it will be very subjective about who decides do they need a plan or not. That worries me a little bit, but I get the difficulty in putting parameters around it. You could have thousands of people at an event that will hardly impact waste at all, and you could have a couple of hundred and there will be a lot of waste. So to me, this is all about, with the events part, it's about an emphasis should be on encouragement and help, not on making life more difficult for people, if you like. And I would like to see, if there is a waste management plan needed, it should be a one-pager. Can we please try and get away from these pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of requirements? It's not necessary, but I see that again and again and again. Absolutely, if there is blatant disregard for waste minimisation, then that organisation, there needs to be a mechanism to have a good, stern talk to that organisation. But on the whole, I think people are looking to and happy to embrace better practices that minimise waste. So let's have that emphasis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, colleagues. I think we've done a really good job of interrogating the subject. Thank you to staff for a well-prepared, thoughtful paper today. I think the message here is we want to make it easy for the community to make the right choice. I'm not sure that we can get down to a one-pager in terms of the bylaw, because we've always got to legislate, if you'll regulate for the naughty boys and girls. So on that basis, thank you for the discussion, really good. We'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 5.3. Adoption of the statement of proposal and approval to consult for traffic and speeds limits bylaw. Welcome, Damien, who's going to answer the first question, which is why we're here again on this issue today. Even though it's in the papers, you're going to say it very loudly, aren't you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we are. I'll skip straight to the chase on this one. This is the second time I've been in front of you over this very same topic. In summary, at the time that I presented you on the 28th of November last year and got approval to consult the public, the NZTA Wakakotahi rule was in play. We were following that process and we were going down that path. Change of government after that, and the announcement by Minister Brown regarding the transportation rules has seen us need to consult under the traffic and speed limits bylaw now. Hence, we've modified our proposed consultation to a statement of proposal, which is exactly the same information that I presented to you on the 28th of November last year. So I seek your approval to approve and consult on the traffic and speed limits bylaw. I will take any questions.
Without wanting to lead you, it's because you think this is a really good idea, eh?
it's a good idea to cover both bases so that we don't get tripped up later on after we've gone through a public consultation process and have to go through it all over again. Again, same story as my previous two paper presenters. This is simply to go out to consultation. We get to consultation, we have the hearings, and then we go into deliberations and we take on board the feedback.
Kapai, I had a mission that I hadn't disclosed to not hear from the Chief Executive in this meeting, but I think, oh no, go on. I was going to allow you a special dispensation.
I was hopefully going to help expedite this item in terms of this is really an administrative paper. The issue of whether we should debate or not, you've already resolved and approved. This is simply switching it from a rule-based consultation process to the bylaw-based consultation process. Nothing more. So I would recommend you keep your questions focused on that administrative change rather than relitigating the content of the proposal.
There you go. Thank you, David. Questions? Andrew, you're the only one.
Yeah.
The
So
Chief
look, I hope that I'm
Executive
not.
just asked you not
Yes.
to relitigate.
I know.
So
I'm just
you
about
better
to
not be
say,
relitigating.
if I'm relitigating, you can tell me to shut up. That's fine. I've got actually a couple of questions. The first one is in number 32 here. It talks about officers are satisfied that the traffic and speed limits bylaw is the most appropriate way of promoting a safe and efficient road network, which I get. But I'm just wondering if other road calming mechanisms may have been considered, such as judder bars and I don't know what else there is, but to reduce. Given judder bars are a bit of a topic of the conversation at the moment, it's certainly in my inbox. Well, we've got judder bars around town, and I'm getting quite a bit of feedback about them, so I'm just wondering if those have been considered as part of this.
Judder bars form part of a traffic calming measure. The paper is about setting the speed limits that are enforceable so that when people exceed the speed limit, there can be enforcement action taken. So judder bars form part of traffic calming, which is part of a proposed project in the next LTP period.
Right. Okay. And the other question is it's probably a pretty quick one, hopefully. If the coalition government make a directive through legislation to change speed limits on roads, which they've talked about, can a bylaw override that?
In terms of legislation overrides bylaws in terms of trumping, but it would be, that would be a significant change then for this government to then go, and they've signalled they're reviewing it, they're reviewing the current rule, so they would have to enact legislation to do that. So the approach that we're taking is right now, we have the mandate to continue to consult under this bylaw as per what you've already approved and already agreed. We don't know what central government is doing with the legislation. We're in a grey space, so we will wait and see what happens, and until that future is known, we will continue to operate under our bylaw. So I can't really comment on an unknown piece of legislation.
No, I appreciate that. That's actually my point. If I could just clarify, Madam Chair, that if the government of Central have signalled that they would like the speed limits to be increased, not decreased, which is what was signalled under the previous government. And so if we go through consultation, make a decision, and then legislation from central government comes in play, this whole process
It could be, but let's remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about schools. We're talking about places where there's vulnerable populations. You know, it's about, I think from an intellectual perspective, interesting to know that legislation trumps bylaw, but this is still a good idea.
Yeah, I'm not dismissing that at all.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, playing it out, really. Yeah,
Thank
great,
you.
thank you.
Helen.
Thank you. There's a table after, I can't see page numbers, I'm sorry, on the iPad, but you get to a section of this and it's proposed speed limit changes on local roads in Whanganui District by 30th of June 2027, and it shows existing speed limits, and it's got the red circled speed limits, and then it's proposed speed limits, and it goes after page after page after page. At the very beginning part of that, it shows that, you know, currently Jane Winston Retirement Village, Oakland Avenue, existing sign is 50, but I mean, it should, anyway, it says signposted at 10, proposed limit at 10. Is that within the village? Is that these figures within the village?
Yes, this question was asked at our last meeting, but yeah, please answer it.
It was a while ago, so it's just not clear. Is this the document that will go out to the public?
Yes, it's the document that will go out to the public, and yes, that's the speed limit that is currently posted within the Jane Winston Retirement Village.
I do think it needs to be very clear that that's
we're in question time.
Is it possible to change the document so it's clear that it's within the villages? Because that applies to quite a few of these, and it's not clear to me when you first read it.
Yep, totally.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Rob?
You've stated we can't discuss any of this detail in here. David, I think, just said that it's been decided before. Well, I must have missed out on that. When was it decided what these speed limits were?
Oh dear.
It was brought to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on the 28th of November last year, and these are proposed speed limit changes to go out for public consultation.
Okay, so the 30k for instance outside schools was decided at that meeting, was it?
They're the proposed changes that were agreed at that meeting to go out for public consultation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Any further questions? We have a recommendation before us that the Strategy and Policy Committee adopts the statement of proposal for the Traffic and Speed Limits Bylaw, that we approve the Traffic and Speed Limits Bylaw for consultation alongside the proposed speed limits consultation approved by the committee on the 28th of November 2023. Would you like to move that, Michael? Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Seconded. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Oh, sorry, Michael.
Just a very small one. Just because central government says jump, we don't say how high. We did this in November for the safety of our tamariki, and I am fully supportive of lowering these amounts. I urge all parents to look at your school. So I'm looking at St. Anne's right now, and I'm seeing 30 in the areas, and I'm imagining all those parents who are very happy right now to be going, wow, my kids who are cycling home will be safer. The idiots on the road will be punished, and I'm extremely looking forward to it. And I'm really proud as a council that we've gone, okay, central government said jump, we said how high, they said, oh, don't jump anymore, and we said, no, we're still going to do what's right by our kids. So I'm very happy about this. I look forward to people supporting us in this bylaw change. My only apprehension to this is 2027. I'd love to do it in 2024. So, thank you.
Ross?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually the seconder. It's a hearing thing, Rob and Ross. So I'm the seconder for that motion. That's, yep. And the second thing is, when the Mayor was doing sign language, I'd like to drop the word chicane into everybody's awareness, which is a traffic calming measure that we could be looking at.
Thank you. All those in favour of the recommendations, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and after the break, Charlotte's going to chair the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome back to the public after that break. I would like to welcome Mike Fermor, the Chief Financial Officer, to the table with the paper on the adoption of the 2024 Liability Management Policy.
Thank you. Just a very brief introduction to this item. So the item is recommending that you adopt the liability or revised liability management policy. This policy provides parameters for council to enable it to prudently manage its debt and the associated risks with that, which is the interest rate risk, counterparty risk, liquidity risk, and so on, and manage those risks in a local government setting as opposed to a commercial setting. The policy requires quarterly reporting to the Operations and Performance Committee on compliance with those limits within the policy. The policy has been reviewed by our Treasury Advisors, PwC, and has also gone to the Risk and Assurance Committee to have that risk lens put over it. So I'm happy to take the item as read and happy to answer questions.
I'll just ask a question if I may.
Okay.
So my question is, can you remind me what the Risk and Audit Committee added to, changed?
There was a couple wording changes. The main change was around having a benchmark to compare ourselves against, which is track change towards the end of the policy. I have that there.
Good. Thank you very much.
Josh?
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Just a quick question on page 7 of the policy. Can you explain why there is a difference in debt raised in terms of the interest rate profile and on-lent to CCOs versus debt raised directly? Because I would assume that interest in terms of the impact on the entire group is relevant regardless.
So I'll just bring up the relevant section.
It's the addition on page 7 of 15.
Oh, so the track changes, is it?
Yeah.
My computer's playing up. Is that the second paragraph?
Yeah, so it talks about any debt being raised and on-lent to CCOs versus debt being raised directly by CCOs.
So the debt raised by CCOs and so on is included in forecast gross debt, it's included in interest rate profile, and therefore the interest rate risk is managed. If fixed rate debt is raised, then the amount would also be included within the fixed rate hedging policy.
Yeah, so I'm interested.
And then any debt raised directly by CCO?
That's right, so
yeah,
the
sorry.
difference between those two.
So we have the ability through this policy to on-lend through to a CCO. The debt that we raise is on council's balance sheet, and so we have to manage that prudently. The debts that a CCO, CCTO raises, that is managed by themselves and not by council. It's not on council's balance sheet or core balance sheet. It's on this CCO balance sheet, and so they are to manage that within their treasury policy.
Okay, so even if it's on lent, it stays on our balance sheet, and that's why it's included.
We borrow the money ourselves, so it's on our balance sheet, and then we on-lend it. That becomes then a asset, which is a investment in a CCO or a on-lending, and the two do net off. But because it's debt that we have to the LGFA or our lenders, we have to manage it prudently.
Okay. Thank you.
Philippa?
Just a bit further on that, sorry, but if, and in our case, our CCOs, we're 100% shareholder, and even if they were to externally borrow their own debt, which what I'm hearing is we're not responsible for, this doesn't sit on our balance sheet. But in the event of something going wrong, whatever, that CCO not being able to meet its obligations or whatever, what that becomes our liability.
Yeah. So good question. When I say it's not on council's balance sheet, it's not on the parent balance sheet. On the group accounts, it is. The CCTO's have the responsibility for managing their assets liabilities, and council doesn't interfere in that. Perhaps as a starting point, under the governing documents of the CCOs, a company constitution for holdings, they have to seek council approval in the first place to borrow money. So that's the first control that's in place, and they would need to report through their financial statements their assets liabilities. Now, a CCTO borrowing directly from a lending institution, the lending institution will require security against that CCTO, and invariably, as we've seen, as we've on linked through to holdings, that will come back through to council, and we would need to provide a guarantee for a CCO or another form of security for a CCTO in the form of uncalled capital. So that requires council approval as well. Yes, there are controls in place, I guess the bottom line is.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mike, the borrowing limits on page 4 of the policy are in the in situ limits. I don't think they've been changed at all, have they?
This is 200% of revenue, and those ones.
Yeah.
No, they are the same. We considered them prudent currently, and we see no reason why they're not prudent going forward. I have in the policy, it does state that we can have more generous limits through borrowing through the LGFA, but we believe in the environment of Wanganui, these limits are appropriate. I've always said that these are not something to aim for, but if we started going above, for example, 200% of revenue, and that's the one we tend to focus on perhaps more than others at the moment, if we're getting above 200% of revenue, don't forget at some point we have to pay it back. That is quite a burden on future generations. So we need to at least question if we start getting up to that limit.
Okay, so just for the benefit of the public that may be interested, so what is our percentage of that limit now, our borrowing now?
Our net debt, net of our net of our pre-funding of April maturities, it's reported in next week's operations committee, is around 135, 136, around that number. Our current revenue is round about in the 90s, so we're about probably 130%, something like that. So we're well below the 200% revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think Andrew was actually wanting to move that initially. Okay. I will just say that I am really happy with the process so far, and it gives me great confidence that this has gone through the Risk and Assurance Committee. So thank you for all the work on this so far. Kate, you can move that, and can I get a seconder? Jenny? Thank you, Mike. And all in favour? Oh, debate. Yeah. Discussion. Have we got any comments on this? No comments? Brilliant. All in favour? Great. Against? And that is carried. And who's up for this one? Legislation and consultation update. Elise and Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the legislation and consultation update paper for February. The purpose of the paper is to provide an update on legislation, consultations, reviews, inquiries, and any other policy directions made by central government which will have an impact on the council or the district. So I'm sure you're well aware, since December the government has passed several pieces of legislation under urgency, and they're all listed in the paper, so I'm not going to read them all out now. A just note of particular interest to local government sector was the repeal of the Natural and Built Environment and Spatial Planning Bills, which was the RMA reform. There are a number of other pieces of legislation which are now being progressed, and those are listed in the upcoming consultation section. In terms of what space and time available for consultation on these pieces of legislation, some of them we are unsure, and some of them may be passed through urgency and therefore truncating the select committee and consultation process. Of particular interest is the repeal of the Water Services Entities Act, and as you'll see in the paper at the time of drafting it, the government had not introduced the legislation, but this happened on Tuesday this week. The government introduced its repeal legislation and said that that will be passed by the end of next week. Alongside that, it also announced its process and timeline for the implementation of its local Water Done Well program. And this announcement is in terms of the direction of travel, it's all in line with what we've already outlined in the strategy and policy paper. So some key points to note are that the policy direction would move from the mandatory 10 entity model to an optional model. The new legislation will streamline the ability to move to a regional model and likely encourage that approach. The regional work mentioned in the paper is part of the work to consider our options moving forward and to understand the impacts, particularly on council's finances. So that work is happening internally. Catherine's heavily involved in that, and I've invited her to come up and talk a bit more if there are questions. So as that work progresses over the next 3 to 6 months, you will be kept updated and briefed on this work through the normal processes. We do want to reiterate, though, the legislation and the government process is still in its early stages, so we don't have any more information than what has been made publicly available this week. But if there are questions on what's been made available, Catherine is able to help, hopefully. So otherwise, I will take the paper as read and happy to take general questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. Josh.
Thank you. General question, so I hope you permit it. But Catherine, I wonder if you could give us a general update on the work that you've been doing in the context of the Water Services Bill being repealed, or in the lead up to it.
Certainly. I think a lot of the work has been focused, my work has been focused on the regional work, which whilst it's taken a lot of my time and energy, I will confess that work has been progressing very slowly, partly because of the availability of information from the National Transition Unit hasn't been as forthcoming as we'd hoped. So we've just taken some steps to kind of change how we'll approach that work and get it moving more quickly in the next couple of months. So that's taken a lot of effort and also just been focused on sort of working through the theoretical implications of the change of policy as had been kind of trailed, but been a little bit in a hurry up and wait situation, if I'm completely honest, while we've waited for both the repeal legislation, which on the whole is a fairly straightforward repeal. It's been through under urgency, there's no select committee process, etc. So the announcements this week have been helpful. It's helped us clarify what we think the timelines for the work we need to be doing are, and then also has given us the space to be just thinking through some of the implications and how we want to approach that optioneering.
That's a great summary, thank you. I might just ask one more quick question on a different matter, if that's okay. Just on the local electoral restoration of polls, so that's purely that you're monitoring it at the moment. Is there any indication of timeline there?
No, I don't. That's as much information as I have.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been signalled, but we don't have a time frame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. Rob.
Thank you. Yes, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, the government have announced that there will be a referendum on Maori awards for those that introduced Maori awards since the time the law was changed. So first of all, I would have thought that that might have been in this paper, but so I'd like you to comment on that. And
Rob, sorry, I will just point out that that is the question that Josh just asked.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
what was the
can you
answer?
summarise the answer again? Thanks, Elise.
Yes, it is listed. I've included it, but it's included as monitor to be confirmed in terms of timeframes, because there are no timeframes on when that will come in, but I will keep it. It's very much on the list, and we are certainly monitoring that, and we'll keep you informed.
Okay.
So it's just called Local Electoral Restoration of Polls. That's the title at the top of page 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And the other question is
point of order.
Just clarification, maybe not order.
Okay.
There's a difference between the community's right to demand a poll, and I thought what Councillor Vincent was talking about was that the government may repeal the whole.
No, I wasn't talking about that.
So you're just talking about demanding the poll.
What I heard was an update on which you're satisfied with that answer?
Yeah,
great.
I'm happy with that.
All right, I just thought it was we're
thank
talking
you.
slightly two different things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Philippa.
Yeah, and the second question, if I may, with the local water done better and the regionalisation, I'm very concerned that we're heading down a regional path, so what work has been done to establish which is the better way for Wanganui, go it alone or regionalise? So what work is actually being done on that?
I've partially covered that in my earlier answer, but I think David will jump in.
Through you, Madam Chair, that work's ongoing at the moment. We do have updated models from the DIA that were produced by Wix, I can't remember their full name, the Water Commission for Scotland, when they were doing the early work. They did produce a financial model for what it would look like if the council went alone, as well as regionalised models and then the big 4 entities. There wasn't much difference in the forecast pricing forward to 2051 between the council going it alone and a regionalised model. So the case to prove that a regional approach is going to be better for our community is still out there, and the debate's yet to be had. Some of the work that we've asked Catherine to do is to refine that work and bring something back to us so that you can then consider it and make your own choice. I think one of the pleasing things from the announcement earlier this week is that it sounds like it's going to be up to us again. Local communities, local councils are going to be in the driving seat of deciding what's best for our community. So this really opens the door for us to take another look at these things rather than being forced into it by a mandate. But the work's yet to be done.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Any more questions?
Yeah, I just have a little question.
Sorry, go
like
for it.
carrying on from that, and perhaps my question's already been answered by what David just said. So should I assume then, from the discussion thus far, that there is no intent in the legislation from what we've seen so far to direct councils on what they've got to do?
Yep, that is a very, very, very clear message that there will be no direction one way or another. There will be regulatory standards, both economic and infrastructure and financial requirements around sustainability of finances, and there will be a regulatory backstop as the intention for sort of the government to be able to take action if councils aren't demonstrating how they can meet those standards. But the detail of what those standards are and the choices that we will have choices about how we choose to achieve those standards.
Right, but you still have to achieve them, and if you don't achieve them, you have to do what you're told.
Yep.
Right.
That's the implication of the policy as it's currently articulated. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Really appreciate the answer.
I might just add something because I think what I said in introductory remarks may have been misconstrued, is that moves from the mandatory 10 entity model to an optional model, leaving it back with local councils. The new legislation will streamline the ability to move to a regional model if you so wish to. So it's about making it easy, but as Catherine Everund said, we don't expect it to mandate councils to move to regional. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, with no more questions, can I get a mover? Thanks, Jenny. And a seconder, Glenda, thank you. And open for comments and debate. Rob? Go for it.
Thank you. Yes, the major one here, of course, is the Water Services Entities Act, and I would just like to say that my opinion is that this community dodged a bullet here, and I am very pleased to see that once again the decision-making powers are back with local authorities. You know, and I refer to the work that was done by Castalia for the Whangarei District Council when they were comparing it whether Whangarei should go in to the model, the earlier model of Labour's two different proposals. And Castalia did a report for the Whangarei District Council which was clear. It was clear they would be better off on their own. You know, and that's the sort of work that has to be done here. And I just hope that early on in this process that we get alongside a consultancy such as Castalia, who will give us some factual information about whether we're better off staying alone. And it does concern me, Chief Executive raised the model that Wix put forward. You know, this Wix model has been totally discredited by the information they've put forward. It's been discredited in this room by previous infrastructure manager Mark Hughes that said, Wix are telling us that we have to spend 1.4 billion over the next, before 2050. That's what we are supposed to be spending. And he said, well, our total replacement value of all our Three Waters infrastructure, everything, is 700 million. So in the next 20 years, we'd have to replace it 1.5 times. You know, that's the credibility that was stretched. And I would just ask that early on in this process that we get alongside a consultancy that can give us the information and tell us what's best for Wanganui. Thank you.
Jenny.
Thank you very much. I particularly like this this report for this section of the reports to us in this committee. It's a rare occasion when we get to actually see all of the legislative things that affect us in one place, and we don't have the time to go and hunt them out. So to all the staff involved, much appreciation. It does appear to be a move towards more independence of councils. I particularly like, it's a minor one, but the fact that, you know, they're looking at whether or not we as councillors can regularly join these meetings remotely and be counted as present. I think that's a simple thing. It's disappointing that on the other side they want to potentially reintroduce the poll or whatever you want to call it around Māori wards, but that's hopefully that fails. So again, thank you very much for the report. It's a very good one.
Thank you, Jenny. And Andrew.
Yeah, my thoughts, comments really echo what Jenny's just said. You know, looking through this list of legislation changes right now, I think it'd be a tricky time for the policy team to take on board all of the changes that are happening and will happen, and so it's living in a bit of ambiguity and in the world of you know, a lot of nebulousness, if that's a word. But I think it's really helpful to have this, and I'm hoping that at least for the next little while we can have this as a standing item to keep updated with the legislation and the changes that are going on. As Councillor Jenny said, it's pretty hard to, amongst everything else we're doing, to keep updated with that. But if we could have a summary like this just for the next little while that things are a bit fluid, that would be great. The other point about this is that what is pleasing is that if legislation had passed, we would be a very diluted council organisation in regard to what we had control over and ownership over, whether it be Three Waters or the RMA or other legislation that basically took away our power and control. So what is encouraging for me is that we're seeing what we've called localism or subsidiarity come back to us, at least implied in this legislation, which is, I think, what we all want, and that's what we all fought for, and it seems to be coming back. So we've fought the good fight, and this legislation would suggest that it was worth it. So thank you.
Thank you. Philippa.
Yeah, no, a really good, concise report. I mean, there are a number of things going through Parliament here, and obviously some have been through, moved through quickly through this new government. That, which we want to keep on our radar, even around the employment relations, like it would be, I imagine, around our economic development or our employment, somehow we or Wongian partners would want to monitor to some degree the impact of the 90-day trial coming back in for employers, 20 or more. Obviously very interested in the local electoral restoration of polls, and if the community's right to demand a poll, personally I would see that as a real negative. It's interesting around even local members, the right to participate remotely. I mean, I think generally it's a good thing, but you wouldn't want to see that being totally abused. But the key one, obviously, and this council should be trumpeting it, is the repeal of the Water Surfaces Entities Bill Act. Previous council, I think it was, and this council has been very strong, and our mayor, CEO, I think, have actually gone to Parliament to speak on this issue, and but certainly this council voted against Three Waters or affordable water. Obviously, no question around the regulation of water needing to be stronger, but the comments of Councillor Vincent, this council has invested heavily in its Three Waters, and the case certainly was not proven. But I think it is important for our community that we don't just take it, that we just go back to what we did, that we work with someone like Castalia, hopefully, not a huge piece of work, to see is it alone, is it regionally, to get the best, because our Three Waters are so important, the cost of them, and the benefit to the communities. But is it something that we're best to keep locally or even possibly regionally? But yeah, thanks for the piece of paper, and thanks for the time speaking.
Thanks, Philippa. Kate.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. Firstly, this is a long-standing item on this agenda, and my intent is that it will continue to be, because this is one of the important jobs that we can do to shape our world wider than our district. So it's really important that we're well informed about what's up in terms of proposed legislation. That's one thing. Second thing, a teensy bit off topic, but I really support thus far what we're doing in terms of not using consultants to actually build from the ground up what the best outcome in the Three Waters space will be for us. Yes, there is a case for consultants, but I would suggest to you that consultants on the whole Three Waters things is why we got into the one size fits all mentality at the start. So I'm really appreciating the intel that we have on our team in bringing this up to the table. Thirdly, I'd just say that, and I guess this suggestion is formed by my background in health, when DHBs were supposed to be acting regionally, but the KPIs and the obligations that they had were not clear enough from a ministerial level, in my view, to actually force you or force some members of a region to do the right thing in terms of think broader than their own population. So I will look forward to what comes next, the clarity around the obligations that have been outlined and talked about today in terms of what each, the performance measures and the KPIs that each council has to meet, and if you're not meeting them, then what? Do you have to, from a New Zealand Inc. perspective, do you have to join up with your neighbours and actually get a bit more broader thinking? Sorry, that wasn't very
I think that's
coherent, but
I think that's something the whole country is eager to see fall into place. Thank you, Kate and Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great report, and I particularly want to thank the policy team, and also in terms of the Three Waters element of the report. Really appreciate having Catherine's expertise within the organisation at the moment is really helpful for us. And in terms of that particular piece of legislation, there are some positive aspects in the localised control. I mean, I was particularly concerned about what it would mean for the local development of new housing, where we could no longer charge development contributions and facilitate the inputting of those additional pieces of infrastructure ourselves, and where it would be the responsibility of an external entity to do so. I was concerned about what it would mean for us to retain our role as the local roading authority, while the stormwater underneath would be the responsibility of a external entity. So there are positive elements. But the question of funding and financing, sustainable funding and financing across the entirety of this country is still a very relevant one. And we need to remind ourselves that while, yes, we have done investment in the past, we're still not sitting pretty. We've still got challenges in stormwater. We've still got challenges with even wastewater. I mean, we heard about the breaches earlier last year, and there will come a time when major assets like our wastewater treatment plant need replacing again. And so we can't purely be looking at the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We need to be thinking about 30, 40, 50 years down the track, and how the government achieves a system where funding is managed sustainably. And that question is still very much unclear from my perspective, and they need to provide the detail around that. I just want to turn quickly to the Māori wards restoration of polls legislation as well, because this is one that does concern me. And it concerns me because the agreement in the ACT Party's element of the coalition arrangement is that a poll will be required for any council that introduced Māori wards during the period where a poll wasn't required, and that requirement would sit at the next election. So that'll be 40 councils potentially at the next election holding a binding referendum on Māori wards. And I would put it to this council that will split the country right down the middle all over again. And that's an issue that we should be paying very close attention to. And I think we should be adopting the position of Local Government New Zealand on this, which is that all wards need to be treated equally. We don't currently require a referendum of any sort for geographical wards, so why the hell should we for a Māori ward? So looking forward to seeing the detail around that, and I would urge us to provide a submission on it as well and speak very strongly against it. Thank you.
Ngā mihi, Josh. And last question, Peter. Sorry, comment. Go.
Yeah, it's more a request than a comment, and that is, could this report go to the Risk and Assurance Committee first, please, or as well as?
This is a standing piece of work that comes directly to strategy and policy for external submissions. I think it's quite well placed within strategy and policy, personally, but that is something that we can have a discussion about.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the motion on the screen, that the Strategy and Policy Committee received the report, Legislation and Consultation Update, February 2024. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Against? That's carried. And on to the last item, the work programme. Can I invite Lance Kennedy up to the podium? Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. This is a nice short paper to end your meeting. I haven't really got much to say other than within the terms of reference you'll see on the paper, one of your responsibilities among many is the district plan. You'll see it's absent from this list at the moment. It will be on the next one because there is about to be a lot of work in terms of a district plan review kicking off in the near-ish future, so that will become a frequent flyer on this paper. Other than that, I'll take it as read. It's reasonably straightforward. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Nothing too technical though.
I don't expect any questions on this paper. And I don't, yeah, happy to move. Andrew, and seconded by Josh. Is there any comments on the work programme? No? All right. I will just say that we are very much heading into consultation time zone, and it's something that I'm looking forward to. We'll put the recommendation on the screen that the Strategy and Policy Committee received the report for the Strategy and Policy Committee Work Programme 2024. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And now I will close the hui. I oha ki runga kia ranganui, I oha ki raro kia Papatuanuku. Wakatairanga, te kupu, te kōrero, te mahi, ki te pō o te ware, hei taonga, I mahi a muri, ka puta, ki te waio, ki te o marama, homie, huie, taikea. Thank you, everyone.